A lot of folks want to be California's next governor. 17 are on the June 6 primary ballot. The top 2 finishers will advance to November. We haven't interviewed all 17, but we have interviewed the 5 candidates who have done the best in the polls. Hopefully you caught some of those shows, but if you didn't, or if you just want to size them up side by side, we've got highlights right now on Inside OC. Inside OC is brought to you by
Each new community 5 Point brings to life represents a promise delivered. Great neighborhoods are more than just places to live, they are places to connect. 5 Point is a proud sponsor of public television and community programming.
All your life, people talk about what's best for you. But to most people, it's just that. Talk. Unless you're with Memorial Care, a healthcare system devoted to one important thing: what's best for you.
Hi, I'm Rick Reiff. Next January, Governor Jerry Brown will step down after 4 terms, spaced over 44 years, a record that will stand at least as long as California has term limits. His replacement will take over a state of great achievement and great problems, of staggering wealth and shocking poverty. It's a big job. In recent months, we've talked to all 5 of the candidates who have been highest in the polls. So let's hear again what they had to say. Let's start with the consensus frontrunner, Democratic Lieutenant Governor and former San Francisco Mayor Gavin Newsom.
Well, yeah, I grew up in San Francisco, 5th generation San Franciscan. Life steeped into politics, cause of contribution, public service. I grew up idolizing Bobby Kennedy, idolizing Sarge Shriver. In fact, I've grown more and more passionate about what Sarge Shriver represents.
Your dad was involved in politics.
My dad was a judge on the Superior Court of Appeals, had a life as an activist, was very involved in environmental causes. So my entire life was, the sense of responsibility that I had agency, that, you've got a voice, you've got to share it, you got to step in, you got to step up. And there was a sense, I think the elliptical language of the 60s, a sense of idealism that came out of the 60s, I sort of inherited a little bit of that from my father, this notion of standing up for ideals, striking out against injustice, and an entrepreneurial energy that I got from my mother, a single mom. Dad and mom were divorced after just 2 years. She raised me and my sister. We were a foster family growing up. And she struggled, but she had grit and perseverance, and there was a toughness to her, and that brought me into a life of entrepreneurialism. And right now I'm proud to have 23 small businesses. I employ close to 1,000 people in the state. So it's the combination
and
of
what kind of business?
Restaurants, hotels, wineries, retail outlets. And so I have this deep sense of entrepreneurialism, which is about solving problems, not managing problems, and a deep sense of idealism about solving, in the language of the 60s, ignorance and poverty and disease. And I think it marks a little bit of my politics, and it marks a little bit of differentiation, candidly, of my politics from sort of the orthodoxies and the ideologies that are more traditional. I'm passionate about radically changing the way we produce and consume energy. I'm very passionate about the work the governor's done in the legislature.
But won't that
raising
cost
the bar.
the kind of jobs you're talking
about? I think creates many more jobs, and I think will be lost. And look, I want to lean into the future. This is the future, low carbon, green growth strategies. I think there's 3 things that are going to define the next decade in debate in this state and this country. The issues of debt and entitlement, energy and climate change, and the issue of the merger of IT and globalization detonating at the same time. California is leading in its low carbon green growth strategies. California is a model for the rest of the nation and for the rest of the world. I want to maintain that status. When I was mayor of San Francisco, there was no city in the country that was more aggressive in low carbon green growth strategies. And right now there's few cities in America doing as well as San Francisco. And incidentally, despite my negativity about some of the areas where we're not performing in California. Since 2010, no state's created more jobs than California. Our unemployment's gone from 12.4% now to 5.6%, again, non-seasonally adjusted. We're making great progress despite the dystopian vision that some had laid on the footsteps and the door of Governor Brown and others, that our policies would drive jobs when in fact we're creating jobs. You've got 2 unfunded liabilities. You have your pension and unfunded health care liability. If you have a discussion about the budget in California and you're not talking about health costs, then you're not having a conversation about the budget. There's three areas of the budget that are devouring the budget. It's pension and retirement benefits, it's health-related costs, and continued corrections costs that continue to increase in the state. Those are the outsized areas that we need to temper. I made a point when I was mayor of San Francisco when we did 2 rounds of pension reform. We did it with, not to, labor. We did it across the bargaining table. It's a different approach. Some people want to just take on and take cheap shots at labor. That's not my approach. It's the old African proverb. You want to go fast, go alone. You want to go far, go together. And I think increasingly labor recognizes that this is a growing progressive issue. Why do I say progressive issue? To your point, it's crowding out the rest of the budget. And if we want to invest,
we have 30 seconds.
If we want to invest in preschool, you want to invest in prenatal care, you want to invest in child care, you don't have that discretionary budget if more and more of that budget is being devoured by unfunded liabilities. And so we've got to address it. And I compliment the governor, but clearly that's not an issue going away.
Now let's hear from another Democrat, former Los Angeles mayor and former California Assembly Speaker, Antonio Villaraigosa.
Well, first of all, I'm pro-teacher. I was married to a teacher for 20 years. I know how hard teachers, I represented them.
You were
the
a teachers union organized. Some
Exactly
would say there's some irony in that.
Well, for 8 years. So I respect teachers, and I know they have a tough job. But I also believe that we have to put the interests of kids first. We got to stand up for the notion that these kids can learn. When we had a 44% graduation rate, the excuses I heard was, these kids are poor, they're English language learners, they're foster kids. And I said, you know, you're describing me. I wasn't a foster child, but I was poor. I was the first to graduate from college in my family. These kids can learn. And I thought we needed to set high standards, focus on teacher training, bring in strong collaborative instructional leaders, and create a culture where parents are involved in our schools. I want the kids and their parents to have the power to choose a local school that's successful or another school that is even more successful. A local school that's failing to a charter school is an example. We tripled the number of charters while I was mayor, but more importantly, we quintupled the number of charters at 800 and above when we were measuring what a successful school was.
You made a comment recently, you referred to Davos Democrats, and Davos is that resort in Switzerland where big money and big politicians go and talk about trends and everything in the world. Was that a little bit of a shot at Lieutenant Governor Newsom?
Well, when Gavin Newsom was going to Davos, I was going to the U.S. Conference of Mayors. They're held at the same time. I was invited to Davos every single time. And what I said at the convention was, I criticized those Davos Democrats who fly over the homes of people we left behind and have never been in their living rooms. And what I said is, I've been in those living rooms. I've lived in those living rooms. I want to stand up as a party and as a state for the notion that a great state is a state where we're growing together, but we're not leaving so many people behind. We always have known what the path to the American dream and to the opportunity of America that I've been able to enjoy. It's an education. We got to educate and train our kids, and that's what I was speaking to. And I said, you know, it's great to stand up for people who drive a Tesla, but we should be standing up for people who drive a Toyota or ride a bus the way my mother did. We got to grow middle-class jobs, and we got to improve our business climate. I agree, particularly for small business. It's very difficult to do business in this state. And I think you could be for, you know, human capital and investing in people, and also, you know, for small business. I mean, think about this. A small business is the motor force of the California economy. It's not big business, it's small business. They're the people hiring people. Yeah. They're struggling to make ends meet. And I think we could create a better environment for them. I think we could educate their kids, train them for the jobs of the 21st century. So I don't disagree with the notion that we could do a better job there. That's why you don't see me tweeting and talking as much as some people do with respect to what's going on in Washington, because I say, you know, the best way to kind of fight back the noise is to do a better job at educating our kids, at creating jobs, at building infrastructure. It's showing that the California way is a better way for America. So LA didn't need Sacramento to push us into addressing climate change. We signed on to Kyoto almost as soon as I got elected. We reduced carbon emissions by 28% below Kyoto levels. That's 4 times what Kyoto requires. That was the #1 American city, #5 in the world. But at the same time, we created green jobs. We worked with USC, UCLA, and Caltech, with the Chamber of Commerce, with small business, to create jobs around this changing environment and in cleaning up our air.
Now let's hear from another Democrat, State Treasurer and former State Controller John Chiang.
It's a good old American story repeating itself once again. So my parents came separately. They came from Taiwan. They came in the 1950s. My dad, when he came to this country, had 3 shirts, 2 pairs of pants. And back in the 1950s, you had to leave it all. You had to leave your family, you had to leave your culture, your food. America was very different. But that very idea of coming to America, getting higher education, and the opportunities that education provides was one that drew my dad and drew my mom. And just like others, they worked from lower income to middle income and put us in good middle income stead.
Wow. And initially you were in New York City. Is that where you were born?
Born in New York, in Manhattan, and then moved to New Jersey and then to suburban Chicago. So as I pointed out, and I was joking with you earlier, because you're from the north side, I'm south side Irish. I went to DePaul University for a year, won the top accounting scholarship, decided to go wild and switched from accounting to finance, graduated from the South Florida, then went up to Washington, D.C. to law school at Georgetown, and then wanted to find that where I thought would be the best place to live my adult life. And when you thought about all the great aspirations, when you thought about this great coastal background that you have here, it's like, I'm going to give California a shot. So it's been the best decision ever.
There was a recent article that referred to the candidates in the race as being these outsized personalities, except for you. They described you as the person without bling. Like all the other guys running, there's several of them have bling and you don't. How do you feel about that?
I'm okay with that, right? We're Midwesterners. I'm just, the good neighbor next door who does the right thing that you can depend upon, that is responsible and will be there with you for the fight. We grew up in the city of big shoulders. I like that. We're the city, take on the big responsibilities. And so that's what I've tried to do in my public service. So I don't need to have the outsized personality. I just want to be the person who delivers effective and positive results.
Yeah. So what do you think the biggest challenges are facing California?
So one of the massive challenges we have is that we have still massive wealth inequality in this state. Even though California has some of the strongest economic growth in the United States of America. We've recovered from being the world's 12th largest economy, today the world's 6th largest economy. We still have 22% of Californians who live in poverty. We have 1/3 of Californians who qualify for Medi-Cal. And so if we have any tip over and the economy starts to slow down, right, that's a huge financial challenge for Californians going forward. So what do we do to make sure that we provide better education for all Californians? How do we make sure that they get great jobs, good health care, can live in housing that's affordable in this state? That's my focus. It's always been my focus.
And so how do we do that?
We have to make sure that we have greater accountability and transparency, support what's going on in the classroom to make sure that teachers feel that they're well led, well supported, well trained. You wanted to have great school site leadership. Today, as I mentioned, I chair over a dozen economic development authorities, financing great companies to stay here in California or to move into the state of California. We want to continue to be that epicenter of innovation.
What do you think differentiates you from the other candidates running for governor?
Leadership and financial expertise. So if you go back to those very difficult financial years, I was the one who stood out. I was the one who took on the system, right? I challenged Governor Schwarzenegger on budgeting. I made state finances more transparent. I've left the controller's office, but just go to the controller's website. You can see what the state's revenues, disbursements, and cash position is on a monthly basis. I highlighted the numbers for local governments because we had 4 cities file for bankruptcy. If you want to have a great California, you can't have cities and school districts filing for bankruptcy hand over fist. And then I kept California from defaulting on debt by issuing those IOUs, keeping California from going into junk bond status, saving Californians hundreds of millions of dollars that today we can use for the University of California or healthcare. You didn't hear other voices, right? Because that happens to be my choice of expertise.
Now for the Republicans. Here's San Diego businessman John Cox. Why are you running for governor of California?
You know, it goes back to my beginnings in Chicago, watching the corruption in the Richard Daley machine, which I always fought against when I was a kid. My mom was a Chicago public school teacher, and I've always had this aversion to corruption, Rick. I think corruption is something that holds back people, denies opportunity. I had a single mom. I didn't know my father, and I worked my way through school. I've made things on my own. You know, I built a business on my own, and I think that's the American dream. And I think when corruption and cronyism enter the picture, that limits people's opportunity.
So is California corrupt?
Oh, much more than Illinois. It's just below the surface, frankly. The funding interests control Sacramento. The big union bosses and the big businesses basically carve up the state. That's the reason why this state is the highest cost state in the country. We have the highest tax rates. We have the worst business climate. Our roads are a disgrace. Our education system is near the bottom. Our cost of electricity, gasoline, water are just outrageous. The housing is almost unavailable to people. I mean, people are working 2 and 3 jobs to try to afford a house. I think there is a huge segment of this population who knows that this state is being mismanaged, and they're looking for a businessman. Now, you want to contrast me with my Republican opponent. I've been in business as long as he's been alive. You know, I've been in business 42 years, and that's about how old he is.
You're talking now, when you say my opponent, you're talking about the other Republican.
The other
in the race,
Republican,
Travis
Mr. Allen, is a nice young man, a surfer, much better shape than I am. But, you know, I've been in business for 42 years. I've solved problems for 42 years. I've seen a lot more things than he's seen, okay? And I've met budgets, and I've built a business that's worth over $200 million. I mean, he's a financial planner, but, you know, he's in the business world. But I think people are going to look at my experience in the business world and say, this is a guy with a little, you know, maturity and a little seasoning and a little experience in dealing with some of the headaches. I'm not going to be cowed by a bunch of underlings who are telling me something that I know is not true. You know, I'm going to look beyond the you know, the surface and find out what the real problems in the state are. And I'm telling you, Rick, I believe the people of this state are just sick and tired of the political class. Well, I think the border wall should be uncontroversial. I think everybody wants security. I think legal immigrants, I think even the undocumented immigrants who are here want security. I don't think they want to live next to MS-13 members, do you? I think we got to stop guns and drugs from coming across the border, so I think border security is important. The president has proposed a solution to the DACA. It's the Democrats who don't want to accept it. He wants to basically give citizenship to a lot of DACA recipients, which is a move that I think is a little on the extreme side, but I think it would be okay if we got E-Verify, if we got a guest worker program, if we got some solutions to our problems.
What about a path to citizenship? Because as you know, one of the problems Republicans face, and certainly Donald Trump has been assailed in California for, it's kind of a mean-spirited attitude.
You know, the media has found a punching bag, obviously, and the Democrats love it. Let's face it. They're distracting people left and right about the miserable situation with our housing and our schools and our roads and our water. You know, they're distracting them. The sanctuary state nonsense, which is just a distraction. Recently, they appointed an undocumented immigrant to a state post. I mean, that was another effort to just gin up fear.
Yeah.
See, Rick, the difference between me and those other politicians is that I'm a businessman. I don't have the luxury of getting people angry or afraid. The politicians do that in spades. They just get people so worked up. I want to try to solve the problems, and I think there's a solution to undocumented immigrants. I think there's a solution that respects the law, but also makes it so that people don't have to live in fear of being deported every day.
And now another Republican, Huntington Beach Assemblyman Travis Allen.
Well, so, I started out just as an investment advisor. I own an investment company. I'm a certified financial planner, and I've been doing that for over 20 years. And I still own the company, and I still work full time, as well as, hold down a job as a California state assemblyman. But I had hit a point where I realized that my parents had left the state, my brother had left the state, my best friend moved to Texas, right? He doubled the size of his house, doubled the size of his business, and he didn't pay any income tax. And then I noticed that all of my clients that I managed money for, they started in California, but then they left. So I started out registered for investments in California, and now I'm registered in over 20 states around the country. And I thought, look, I can't go to Texas. The waves are just too good here. I got to stay right here in California. But if I'm going to stay here, I'm going to do something about it. And that's when I got elected in 2012. And you're exactly right. Second worst roads in the nation with the worst traffic in the nation. And look, we all know this. We all get stuck on the 405 and the 5 and the 91. We see traffic every day as a part of Southern California living. I think the official numbers are something like 90 hours of our lives are spent in traffic every year. And that's just the average. That's 2 weeks of work. So the story is, yes, not only do we need to fix the potholes on our roads, but we need to expand our freeways. We actually need more lanes so we can get more cars through and you're not stuck on these freeways.
So we got to raise the taxes to do that.
Well, that's what Jerry Brown would like to sell the California people, but that's actually not the reality. The reality is there's plenty of money in the California budget to do this. As I mentioned earlier, Jerry Brown took the general fund from $86 billion to $125 billion. There's plenty of money in California's budget to fix the roads. The problem is that Jerry Brown has been spending this on pet projects, things like the high-speed rail, and so now he wants to reach even further into California's pockets to fund these quote-unquote road repairs. And I'd mention one last thing too, which is this gas tax is going to cost Californians 12 cents a gallon, 20 cents on diesel. Car registration goes up by up to $175, but here's the real kicker. Not one new lane of freeways will be added anywhere in California. So if you don't like your traffic today, you're going to like it a lot less when you're paying more for it and you're stuck in the exact same traffic.
Okay, so and again, I don't mean to trivialize it, but let's face it, being against a tax is the easier side of the argument. It's always easy to get people upset about paying more taxes. And Californians, as much as they seem to have a liking for big government, has also shown they don't like to pay taxes. What would you do? What would you do to fix the roads? Okay, if there's no new gas tax, how would you solve our problem of crumbling infrastructure?
Absolutely. So look, California's roads are crumbling, and we all know this. This is not even talking about our water infrastructure and our bursting dams throughout California, right? But let's just take a look at our roads. Well, since 2011, Jerry Brown has been siphoning off over $1 billion every single year from existing transportation funding. So the trucks that drive up and down our road pay something called the vehicle weight fee. $1.1 billion a year since 2011 has been siphoned off from the roads into Jerry Brown's general fund. Now, past this, the agency in California that is designated to fix our highways is Caltrans. Caltrans has over 23,000 employees and a payroll of almost $11 billion a year. Now, this is so much money that the Legislative Analyst's Office came out in 2014 and said that, look, of your 23,000 employees, you clearly have at least 3,500 extra employees and maybe a lot more. That costs at least $500 million a year to California taxpayers. So just these two things alone, that's $1.6 billion of just cutting, basically waste in the California government. And then you take a look at all of the other pet projects like the high-speed rail that have been, paid for up and down the state by Jerry Brown. And you can see very quickly that the $5 billion a year Jerry wants to raise by raising your gas taxes and reaching into essentially the poorest of Californians' pockets, this is money that's already there. It's just not being spent well. I am telling you that today's California Democrat Party has left the Democrats, the average Democrat, far behind. They are far, far to the left now, and now we have all the blue-collar Democrats, the Reagan Democrats, and just common sense people that say, look, today's California Democrat Party does not represent me. This creates an opening so big you could drive a truck through it.
And then, again, to play devil's advocate, okay, so if you're going to run a Republican, my gosh, this is a blue state. We've got Gavin Newsom or whoever's going to be over here on the left. Let's get a nice, moderate Republican. Let's get somebody who's socially moderate, can draw in voters. And that isn't Travis Allen. You're a Trump supporter. You're a conservative all the way down the line. How the heck do you win in California?
So I actually think of myself as a rational centrist. right? I just think that, it's very clear. These are common sense issues we're talking about. When we take a look at what the issues truly are in California today, the issues are very simple. We have among the highest taxes in the nation. Those taxes must be cut. We also have rising crime. So 34 of our major cities in the last year have double-digit increases in violent crime. We have the worst roads that we just talked about and the worst traffic in the nation. Our education system used to be among the best. Now it's among the worst. And then our state water project never was completed.
We've got a lot more with these candidates, nearly 4 hours in total. It's all on YouTube. And for more info on all of the candidates, check out this voter guide that you got in the mail, or you can get it online. And that's it for now. You can watch this show and past shows by going to pbssocal.org or rickreiff.com. You can also catch our shows and our post-show open mic chatter on YouTube. And follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again on Inside OC. Inside OC is brought to you by...
Each new community 5 Point brings to life represents a promise delivered. Great neighborhoods are more than just places to live, they are places to connect. 5 Point is a proud sponsor of public television and community programming.
Chapman University is a proud sponsor of Inside OC and community programming.